And I'm pleased to introduce our second speaker as he makes his way to the stage. Joining us is Rohit Wagle from Google, and he is going to be talking to us about Google's Ad Manager SSAI for Dash. And we're looking forward to hearing about it. Come on up.
My name is Rohit Wagle. I work on Google's DAI solution, which is a server-side ad insertion platform. We're part of the Google Ad Manager team, which some of you might know as DFP or DoubleClick. We're slightly different from YouTube or in the way we do things. YouTube monetizes hosted videos, and we are primarily responsible for third-party videos. So I'll talk a little bit about the architecture for DAI, how we do things, and we'll look at an engineering perspective on what it took for us to get ad insertion working on Dash specifically. So as of today, we have a working solution that does live videos, linear videos, and on-demand videos using Dash and HLS on DAI. Okay, so there's a brief overview slide here, but our overarching goal is to be able to have a TV-like experience using SSAI. And what does a TV-like experience mean? Traditionally, ads have been done usually in a client-side mode, where the client or your user's device would be responsible for downloading the ad, figuring out which ads to insert, making sure they're available. Then they would usually have like one or two videos playing at the same time, one playing the content, one playing the ad. They would bring one to the foreground, send one to the background. You will see these like switching artifacts. We don't want any of that. So our goal is to be able to handle all the complexities on the server side, have a seamless playback experience so you wouldn't need necessarily even know where the content ended, where the ad started in terms of switching. And we wanted to do that by keeping all the flexibility still on the publisher side. So what does that mean? We did not want the publisher to change any of their packaging or delivery mechanisms. We did not want them to say, you have to use a specific packager or an encoder. They are completely free to choose whatever they want. They can use their own choice of CDNs. They can use their own choice of players. They can develop their own applications. They can render their own UIs, and we provide some help with SDKs. And specifically, they can own their content completely, which means they do not have to give us access to their content. They can use any DRM they choose. They do not have to share the DRM keys, encryption or decryption keys with us. And using all of this, DAI should still work. Like, we should still have a smooth, seamless ad experience. So how does DAI work? Now, you've already seen a bunch of people talk about SSAI. This is a very general architecture, but this is exactly how DAI works today. In the live linear case, you would have someone with a camera or one or more cameras sitting somewhere generating the raw video streams. They would have SCUDdy markers that go into the streams. All of that ends up in an encoder or a packager somewhere. This is before the CDN. All the manifest and the chunks or the segments end up on a particular CDN. Now this content is ready for DAI to consume and generate ad stitch streams. So this is for the live portion of things. Now on the on-demand VOD side, you don't need to condition the content in real time because the content hardly ever changes. So it's already available on a CMS or OVP somewhere, and all you need to do is create an MRSS feed, which is kind of like an XML file with all the metadata related to the ad ingestion, and send that feed into Google DAI. When this is done, if you can focus there on the client side, the content is now ready to be ad inserted. We do provide SDKs, which the publishers or application developers can use in their applications. Whenever a user wants to view a stream, the first call, which is marked as 1, comes into DAI. We authenticate the call. We make ad requests to the ad manager or the ad server, get back VAST or VMAP responses. Once we know which ads we are supposed to insert, we go to our ad transcoding system. Now here we have a corpus of ads already transcoded with a bunch of profiles ready to serve. This sort of reduces our latency in real time so that we can insert like the maximum number of ads in the shortest period of time. When that's done, a fully stitched stream is returned to the user's device. and it's ready to play content with ads. Now, when the content playback starts, the content segments themselves are served from the CDN, from the publisher CDN, and ad segments will be served from Google CDN. The last part of this diagram is the line going down in number 8. We still need to know which ads were played, how much the user viewed. Did they just view the first part, the last part? We need to know how many quartiles. And all this tracking information has to be sent from the client's device back into the ad manager. And we do that by embedding tracking events in the ad media itself. So at every point in time in the ad media, there's a tracking event, there's HTTP endpoints associated with those tracking events that get fired every time those tracking events are encountered by the player. And there's some information that also flows down to the analytics, so you can see in real time which devices are requesting the data, which ads are being served, the types of ads being served, geography, and other high-level metrics. In terms of brief set of features, some of the features that were really interesting to our publishers, and these are content level features, are something like live to VOD. So if you have let's say a cricket event or a soccer event happening, which is very popular, once the event ends, we want to be able to take this and create a VOD clip out of it and still have ad decisioning work. So this happens in sort of near real time. The moment the event ends, we make it available offline for a little period of time until the publisher has time to condition their content specifically for the VOD use case and ingest it through our MRSS feeds. Scale is an ongoing consideration, so our platform, especially in the live linear case, our platform is geared towards kind of unpredictable scale as well. There's some events like, let's say, the Super Bowl, which you can predict and say, okay, I'm going to expect, say, 5 million concurrents, and you can scale up proactively. Then there are acts of God and news events that you just can't predict that get very, very popular. You could see orders of magnitude increase in traffic in literally a few minutes' time. So we want to be able to support that as well. We need a broad codec support because we are hands-off on some of these things. We do not want to be able to take we want to be able to support all kinds of codecs. And then there's other features like dynamic CDN selection that help you with load balancing, variant filtering, so you can have one asset with 20 different renditions and still serve it on devices that may or may not support some renditions. And flexible ad tracking modes, which you can do either by an API level, SDK, et cetera, et cetera. So some high-level features that are kind of sort of common across HLS and Dash that we support. And because we're doing some of this man-in-the-middle things where we're delivering content as well as ad, we have to provide all these other sort of debugging tools where you can debug the content that's happening. So if we served 404s, we need to know why we served those. Did we have an issue with the CDN, or did we just not see updates for a while? And there's a tool called Stream Activity Monitor. Because all the ad decisions happen on the server side, we want to be able to figure out which ad calls our server made and what were the responses and why did we make the ad decision, why did we insert the ads that we wanted to insert. So this is sort of in a nutshell how DAI works and what are the high-level features. Again, tremendous growth on our platform here. You can see there's a blank slide, a blank space on the right. I did not get approvals to show a nice graphic image over here. But imagine sort of the best ad streaming experience you've had in the last few years and for the most popular events, and that's what that image was. Okay, so let's dive specifically into Dash and how Dash ad insertion evolved on DAI. So why did we choose to do Dash? We were primarily a HLS shop when we started, and about 3 years ago, we got a lot of interest from publishers saying that they wanted to invest in Dash, and the primary reason that they told us was the use of DRM. So DRM is a primary driver for Dash in many, many scenarios. And it sort of helps, and especially in the multi-DRM case where you can just encrypt the content using different DRMs, it also enables us to open up devices across, because of the industry standards. You can have HBB TV devices, smart TV devices, which were not available using the HLS platform to us. But sort of the most appealing from an ad insertion perspective is the support for multi-period. And that's essentially allowing us to mix two different, completely different type of content in one manifest and be able to serve all of this using, with ads and content in the same manifest. So again, we got all excited. We started working on reading the DAS specs. This was maybe 3 years ago. And for those of us who actually finished reading the 200-page spec, it was, we kind of figured out that there's another 200 pages of guidelines that we had to kind of go through. But eventually, we were kind of confident that, okay, we got this thing right, and we sort of created this initial VOD and live POC. So this is a very brief example of how a VOD ad insertion would work. We expect conditioned and packaged content that contains multi-periods to be available. So that on the left, you see a packaged MPD that a publisher would provide us. Now note that there's 3 periods in there. If you just wanted a pre-roll and a post-roll, you do not need to condition, make it into a multi-period. But if you wanted any mid-rolls in there, you have to provide a multi-period content. Now, there's many, many ways of doing this, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but mainly you need to have a multi-period packaged MPD. Once we see this, we'll make a VMAP or a VAST request on behalf of a particular user and create a DAI-generated MPD, which you see on the right, and we've inserted ads as pre-roll, mid-rolls. These are just some random IDs put in there. But you get the idea. It's essentially we increase the duration of content served by the MPD by creating, adding more content in terms of ads. Now, there's a lot more that happens in here while we are inserting this because there's sidecar subtitles that some players would like, some publishers would like. In that scenario, we will kind of extend the VTT or the web VTT or TTML and other subtitles that we publish. And those also change based on the number of ads being decisioned. The live case is slightly different. So the live case, it's not enough to have a multi-period MPD, unfortunately. You need to also know which of those periods are ad periods specifically. So we do that by looking at Q markers inside the MPD. Now this is an example of a binary formatted SCUDdy Q marker, and if this happens to be a splice out or a splice insert containing an out-of-network indicator, we know that this is an ad period, and in the live case, we will do a full period replacement. So in the VOD case, you see you have durations and periods were added to the MPD. On the live case, we will remove the original period and put in brand new ad periods where the original period was. Now, again, the period boundaries have to be created by the encoder because the encoder has enough knowledge about the splice points and everything else to be able to create some of these things. Our job is to essentially take this MPD and make sure that enough ads have been added so that we don't start choking the player in any way, shape, or form. So we fully replace the original MPD, original period with the ad periods. Now note that at the time we're inserting the period, we just don't know how much content is actually going to be replaced. So we have some idea of the content as specified in that binary marker that has a break duration, but that's a theoretical break duration, as we call it, because that actually may or may not match the total duration of the period that's being replaced. So this happens at runtime where we decision ads enough to hopefully fill up the break, but then we have slate at the end to see if we can compensate for any time differences. So in actuality, our total duration of our ads may be slightly longer than the total duration of the ad breaks that are actually being replaced. So in terms of the actual ad insertion, again, we're geared for scale, so all the ad decisioning happens in the background in a large batch of jobs that go, when we see the queue marker, we deploy all these jobs, they go hit the ad server, get all the responses, stitch the ads. But because we're in sort of the critical path, we cannot afford to spend too much time waiting for the ads to come back. Now, what does that mean? Essentially, if you look at a live MPD, it's a sliding window that comes up. So segments are removed from the top, and periods or segments are added from the bottom. So by the time a SSAI solution actually sees the Q marker, we only have maybe like a few seconds to decision the ads and insert the ads. If you wait too little to decision, let's say I want to only wait like 1 second to decision the ads, you're going to leave a lot of inventory on the floor because you're just not going to be able to make all these ad decisions. If you see that interaction that happens between the ad request and response between DAI and the ad manager, you see a bunch of there's a vast call that's being made and you get a response with a bunch of ads. That's a highly simplified version of that ad call. In theory, and in actuality, what actually happens is the VAST itself has redirects to other third-party ad servers. And there could be many levels of redirects. So you go to an ad server, you say, give me some ads. It returns 5 ads. Those ads may not be actually decisioned ads. Those could be wrappers to other ad servers. And each of those will return a VAST response back to you. To actually make an ad decision for a mid-roll, you have to go follow all those redirects, or at least up to certain levels, get all the responses back, create this extended like VAST document per se, with all the tracking URLs and all the ad IDs and all of that other stuff mentioned, have that ready within, let's say, under 3 seconds or so, then go get all the transcodes for these, stitch them into one cohesive manifest, and feed that back to the user. Now, imagine doing this for one user and doing this at scale for, let's say, a 5 million concurrent event that's happening right now. That's a whole lot of ad requests, a whole lot of bandwidth that just happens that we need to finish within a few seconds. And that's not really that much time. So we look for specific cues from the manifest itself to tell us how long we can wait for the ads to be inserted so that we don't starve the player. So again, wait just enough so that at least we get some ads back, but don't wait too long so that you see buffering artifacts on the player. So we use, like, in addition to these, we use like the suggested presentation delay, which kind of tells us how far back the player might have started. The min update period, in which case that sort of tells you how often the player polls you. So if you don't provide updates within that time period, it's likely that the player might just stall. And then there's other UTC timing elements and other stuff which you can imagine you can use to sort of give you a hint of where the playhead is. It gives you a little bit more time to decision the ads. So once we had all of this ready to go, and this was maybe we started 3 years ago. About a year after that, we had a first prototype ready, and we were raring to go. And we decided we started trying to do a POC, and the first thing we noticed is nothing worked. Like absolutely nothing. We couldn't get any playback working. We couldn't get any MPDs to generate it accordingly, the way we thought they were supposed to be generated according to the spec. And what happened over the next year or two is essentially where the actual development of the our ad platform began. So I'm going to go over some of the sort of main takeaways for the pain points from an engineering perspective from now. So from the packaging and encoding perspective, given roughly maybe 3 years ago, there was literally no packagers or encoders available that generated legitimate, spec-compliant multi-period MPDs. And I think at the time, ad insertion was not really a very high priority item on the plate, and even the guidelines, I think, were a little bit vague on how ad insertion could be done. There was no formal spec per se that anybody could use. So a lot of the work that we did after that was just to work with packagers and publishers to figure out what the use cases were for ad insertion and to see if you can get actual multi-period support working. Q point accuracy was also a big pain point at the time. I'll give you an example where everything was sort of done according to spec, but nothing actually worked in real life. When you have an on-demand, at least one packager, I won't go into the names, but at least one packager, when it was taking an on-demand profile content, usually what happens is you have one large file, one large media file defined, and that's what the MPD points to. Well, based on the spec, one of the packagers decided to just have a pointer inside. When it was trying to, let's say, split that file in the middle, they decided to have a pointer inside the file rather than actually split the media. And according to the spec, that was technically not against the spec because it was the spec was a little bit vague at the point. So according to the spec, everything was working fine. When you tried to play back the multi-period MPD, everything was fine. The moment you inserted ads, everything broke. This is typically because players will try to play the first period, and as long as there's not that many changes between the first period and the second period, they just continue to play the first period. So you'll actually never know that there's actually something wrong going on until you actually introduce a different period within the MPD. And when we started doing that, playback completely broke. We couldn't see the ads at all. Some players, kind of broke, but some players just played through the content, never played the ads. All kinds of weird behaviors happened. So we had to kind of work through some of those issues with the packagers. And at some point, there's online discussions going on, and kind of found a middle way where we actually had to split the content to make sure that even when you're doing an on-demand, you can't just use your presentation time offset, point to the middle of the content and say, here, start the next period here. You actually have to split the content at that time for the players to recognize that there's actually something different at this point. Also, there's many, many, many ways to package the same content. If you just take an on-demand video, you can have an on-demand profile. You could have a live profile, a main profile, and a main profile would basically let you do whatever the heck you want. Again, all of these are great things to have if you want to have the flexibility to package your content. The moment you start doing ad insertion, now you have to worry about all these variations that could happen when you're inserting ads, and you have to make sure that all of these different types of packagers work, or you have to limit yourself to say, this is the most common type, and we want to start here, and then expand the scope at that time. That's kind of what we did. We kind of laser focused on maybe just the live and the on-demand profile, and kind of moved up from there. All right, now the flip side of things, on the playback side, period transition was a big pain point for us over the last couple of years. And all of the situations have technically improved. Even in the previous slide, when I said there's no support 3 years ago, now at least I know half a dozen packagers that support multi-period that just kind of works today. So from the playback side, issues arise when players are transitioning across content or across period boundaries. Now note that especially among older devices, multi-period support may or may not work, but sometimes in many cases we do see it working, except in a very narrow scenario. In which case you cannot use something like a main profile for the older players. They generally prefer a very targeted, either a live profile or an on-demand profile. So if you have ads that you're generating using, let's say, a live profile, and you have the content using an on-demand profile, that probably just wouldn't work. So we had to change some of our strategy. Even though we had spec-compliant MPDs, we had to be very, very specific in what we added for playback to just simply work in these older devices. And most of these older devices don't get updated all that lot, so you don't see like player updates on those kinds of things. So you have to be very careful about what sort of MPDs you provide. Now, in our scenario, especially in the live case, our ads could be slightly longer than the actual ad break being replaced. So you could see, we try to not leave gaps because players tend to hate that and they really don't know what to do, especially large gaps. So we tend to go slightly longer than that because we just don't know how much content is going to come down the pipe. So our ads are slightly longer, and we give hints to the player in the start values so that we say, okay, even though I have 61 seconds worth of ads and you have a 60-second worth of break, you should transition out at the 60th second. So you cut the ad wherever you need to, just go back to content. And in many cases, that just works. But there is technically no single way a player or multiple players can agree on in terms of which clues to provide in the MPD for that to happen. So in theory, just setting the start values to the right value should work, and they work across some players. But then you have to add these additional duration values and give these additional clues to some players to say that, okay, even though I'm giving you 61 seconds worth of content, just make sure that it's only 60 and you transition out. So these extra clues that that's kind of aren't called out in the spec anywhere have to be provided for this seamless transition to work. Again, all of this kind of works at this point, but it was a kind of pain trying to figure out with every player as to what the right value should be. And last but not the least, this is sort of where we still see some players have trouble, is transitioning from unencrypted media to encrypted media. So content with Dash is primarily encrypted using whatever DRM the publisher wants. The ads are not encrypted, right? So why do we want to encrypt ads? If more people want to see my ads, go for it. But then when you're transitioning from one period to another, now the player needs to know that it's actually a different period with a different type of encryption. If the player is lucky enough to start in the content or start playing during the content which is encrypted, then its decoder is already initialized for a sort of a decrypting mode using whatever Widewine or PlayReady, whatever it wants. If it's not that lucky and it starts in the middle of an unencrypted ad, it's going to say, oh, I don't need to do anything with my decoder. It's just going to work, right? So when the period boundary comes and if it's playing too close to the live edge, you see the player now making these frantic calls to get the license keys, and then the license keys might take a little bit of time. And then the player will start, you see these buffering artifacts that happen. So again, there's no easy, there's no clear way to specify in the MPD that we have this mixed type of content other than putting it right in the period itself. There's ways around this by maybe copying the content protection elements onto the ad periods, again, a hacky way. But I think a lot of the players we've seen who still have trouble are changing their architecture to progressively or do actively, proactively go get these license keys ahead of time. One more thing, I mean, this is especially not a Dash specific issues, but scale is other people have hinted to this. Scale is an ongoing challenge for SSAI. There's two primary things that we need to do when we talk about scale. One is a per user stitched state that we have to keep, which is the ad pods that have been specifically decisioned for a particular user for a particular break. And the other thing is the time it takes to decision the ads. So because we only have a few seconds, when an ad break actually occurs and you have a multi-million concurrent event, you see this giant spike of ad requests being sent to the ad servers. And that's generally because we don't have enough time. So we have to send all these requests as fast as we can to see if we can get any ads back. We're trying to, basically what we're trying to do here is trying to buy ourselves more time to decision the ads, because if we flatten the load out a bit, you actually see much better ad decisioning. You can see a much better fill rate. So it's not just enough to deliver the concurrence, you actually have to improve your fill rates in order for monetization to work. And we think like remote period / Xlinks could help a lot with that. But in reality, I think there is still a lot of ambiguity around Xlinks for us to get it working in a reliable manner. Most of the ambiguity is due to the fact that when we put an Xlink in the MPD, we don't know how long the period is going to be. Right? That's just the way it is. Like, we just don't know. Our hope is that it's requested closer to the actual serving time for the segments, so that we have enough time to actually go make an ad request and actually go fill the ad pod in time. But players tend to aggressively get these so that they can actually figure out how long they have, they can figure out their timelines and they can do more interesting things. But I think this is an area of work that I think we can just try to improve and see if we can get Xlinks working in a reliable manner across all players. Another area, and it's more of a nit than anything else, is the standardization of timed events. We've seen Apple and Microsoft kind of work towards using ID3s. I think hopefully if this is incorporated within the Dash spec, that'll help generally use the standard format for these random ad-based ID3 events. Again, you can do this today, but the app has to know specifically what format it is. If it's recognized as a standard format, then you don't have to worry about adding special parsing capabilities. All right, I think that's all I have. Again, we're very excited about Dash. It's been a journey for the last couple of years, but we do have a working solution. It works great when you have all the right parameters set. And we're going to continue to focus on the ecosystem and not to these one-off solutions where you have to have a certain package or have a certain player. We hope that at some point we'll see multi-million concurrence with ad insertion on Dash very soon. Great.
And do we have questions? Please.
Hi, I know that one of the advantages of dynamic ad insertion is the fact that you can bypass ad blockers. But with the tracking pixel as a requirement for basically the payment systems to kick in, what can you do about ad blockers that are blocking the tracking pixel?
Yeah, we haven't really looked into, or we haven't really focused on blocking, blocking technologies per se for this particular solution. Our sort of goal is, has not been, most of the time when our publishers go, they already have a premium app available, so they can actively disable blockers, disable playback if they detect any kind of blocking technology. Most of the time, when on a server-side solution, if you try to block us, essentially it means breaking playback. While in sort of the client-side case, it's much easier to block a specific, let's say, domain completely so you don't get ads back. But because we're already stitching the whole thing in, and all our tracking pixels are all going on the same domain, it's very hard for ad blockers to block tracking but not block playback. So it kind of is working, but we really haven't really invested in sort of anti-blocking measures per se in this scenario. Because this is mostly DAI focuses on, again, premium inventory where publishers have full control over their deployment platforms. So if this was something that we just wanted to run over a random website, then yes, it could easily be blocked, as you say.
Right, very good presentation. I have a couple of questions, but before that, I will ask only one. But the good news is that in terms of the behavior of the X-links and how the client should do it, or how do you resolve the X-link, as well as transitions between different periods, there is a current work going on in both -IF and Impact exactly to address the issues that you raised. But in terms of the use case, when you inserting ads in the live streams, do you have the case that you need to terminate that ad early because suddenly the live event is coming back and you need to switch back?
Yes, so we do, so that typically that is one of the cases, but in our case, we actually do require that the players terminate early anyway because we would insert a little bit extra ads in that scenario. So we are hoping that just by specifying the start values and the duration values when we know that the period transition occurs, players can do that automatically for us. It's very hard to do that on the server side because you could do creative trimming and stuff, but the older spec doesn't really allow you to pass in a duration, let's say, for the spec segments. You can just pass in maybe numbers or time and other things, but passing a duration and other things could also help with some of that stuff.
And for the advertiser, is it okay in the middle of ad or before ad finishing, switch back to the, don't they say that why my ad has not been played completely? Do you get penalized for that?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, the way it works is, publisher is king. They wanted to switch back. You see a home run and something new happens and you want to switch back. I think that's just the way it is. But we do track specifically when those issues occur. So it can be resolved in billing. So if you have frequency caps and some of these things and you don't want to hold, let's say you wanted to say, I only showed 50% of my ad. I wanted to show it again. That's certainly possible.
All right, I'm gonna, one more question. Well?
Thanks, Glenn. So Rohit, how do you deal with the live sports use case where you don't know when the ad break's gonna happen? And the player you can only do a multi-period break when the player knows about the multi-period. It's only gonna do that when it does a manifest refresh. So if your manifest refresh is 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and you need to go to break just after it refreshes, what's your preferred mechanism for notifying the player that they now need to come back and get a manifest that's going to have your new ad period in it?
I think just lower, for now, just the lower min update period. Just poll us more frequently.
So your ability to insert an ad is plus or minus the polling interval of the manifest.
Yeah, for now, at least, yeah.
Which at its worst would be per segment, but it might be higher than that.
Definitely. I think as in ad insertion, like low latency kind of environments is really bad for us because we have now smaller and smaller time durations to decision the ads. So we prefer that the player polls us more frequently so we can give it the latest manifest, and we can manipulate the manifest so that we have enough time to actually insert the ads.
And have you looked at, there's a standard e-message flag to say, hey, go and update your manifest now. And that would be a clean way to avoid all the unnecessary polling, maybe for an hour, just to tell the player. Have you looked at that approach at all?
We did look into that approach, except that it requires us to change the content. So the e-messages are embedded within the content. We do not ingest the content or change the content in any way. So we might have to put something like an event stream or something in the manifest still. Again, goes back to the same problem. But in our scenario, if the standards can specify that this is a way to go, we can start looking into these, because e-messages are not that difficult to change. But again, since we don't serve the content, that's a limitation for our solution.
Please join me in thanking Rohit.
Okay. Thank you.